Welcome to the fourth part of this playlist focused on orchestral mockups. I started from the basics, the very first episode, and today I'm gonna give you my eight more tips, which I found on the web, stealing them from some really interesting channels here on YouTube. I've done the dirty job for you, and I'm very pleased now to sum them up for your pleasure. Learn how to mock up just by listening very carefully to the reference recording. Don't make use always of Midi scores. It trains your ears. Sometimes you can get more realistic results just by following your own ears. If you were to strictly follow a Midi score, the final sound will be sometimes less compelling. If you work by ear and you can't figure out what instrument is playing, know the very common way orchestral sections are sometimes arranged and combined together. Like for instance, sometimes cellos are doubled with bassoons, or with horns. Very often cellos are doubled with basses, and cellos and basses can in turn be doubled with bones or with tuba. And what about violas doubled with clarinet? Or, I don't know, trumpet with snare drums. Listen to the single orchestral sections one by one and by their own to hear if they are really interlocking. They must sound like a realistic orchestral section. If you work with no MIDI score but by your ear, you're likely to insert or compose parts, notes, or weird sections you are not sure to listen in your reference track. Maybe they're not even present, but you can add them anyway to get your best final sound. Like adding a synth bass with low strings to get a meaty sound. Or a sub bass. Insert harmonics in layers or just a single note in sustain for piano sections to give the idea something is there, some sort of noise underneath, to give realism, to simulate sound reflections and harmonics in the room. This is strings with no harmonics in pianissimo section. That is harmonic. And together. Add in an instrument which is not on that point of the score to announce the melody or to enhance some other parts of your music. Add in a trill or a texture to create the feeling of something confusing or not totally still is happening, or to feel empty spaces with some sort of texture underneath. So the general rule says you must know very well all the tools you're working with. Your DAW, your plugins, your samples, your virtual instruments. But actually, if you work with orchestral sounds and you want to create a realistic mockup, well, you then must know how to use Kontakt. That's the industry standard, period. Know how to change samples inside the Kontakt range page. If there's something you don't like very much with your own sample, you can always tweak it a little bit directly from Kontakt. If you already know what libraries you need to be layered and you find yourself using every time that particular combination, like for instance, I'm used very often to layer string ensemble with, I don't know, violin solo, just to give, that extra bite of realism. So if that's the case, you can set up kind of a template just inside Kontakt, loading up on the same instance of your favorite lips intended for that purpose. You tweak them at your liking, you balance volumes between them, and you're ready to go. To achieve your best sounds from your mockups, you can choose to layer samples or articulations. So, for instance, different sample libraries using the same articulation. Or different articulations using the same library, same sample library, or other libraries. So, convolution reverbs, they provide realistic sound reflections of some specific spaces and ambience through the use of impulse responses. Algorithmic, they can achieve pretty much the same result of convolution verbs, but let's say in a different way, through mathematical processes. For the room, the space, the ambience, you better use a convolution verb to put the instrument in the room, in the space, in the first place, like the space designer in Logic. For the tail of the sound, you better use algorithmic verbs, like for instance, Valhalla room. You can set up to 3 verbs in buses, like I've done here, or directly in the channel strip. So this is called the SML Setup, short, medium, and long verbs. You then can better blend and glue them together to get a more original and realistic sound. Mic positions in your GUI can play an important role in shaping, let's say, the sound of the ambient and of the room and tail verbs. Take advantage of these settings and learn how to tweak them. In many instruments, you better cut frequencies between 3K and 4K. That's where human ear is most sensible. I mean, it's not much of a difference in its own, but if you avoid such a cut in most instruments, you'll definitely get a muddier mix. You then can use specific softwares like Ozone for reference track balancing. For instance, I have a track here. wanna try to reference it with this reference track. I mean, I would try to get a similar sound, shape sound, equalization. So I load my reference track here and I land down on equalizer, and then I'm trying to rearrange the equalizer bands similar to my reference track. Learn how to cheat, especially if you don't own a certain sample library, a certain sample which would fit well, and how to get the best just from what you have. John Cage 433 is a strange, weird, and great piece of music, let's say music, you can use for the sound of the ambience, the room, the space, the audience. You know, just to mimic the players, the sound, the ambient, the room, the space being there, really subtle. Speaking about gears, I want to share to you two of my favorite ones. The first of the two is a USB Midi breath controller. The most used one is this tech breath controller, as you can see here right now in their webpage, which comes along with its own window editor with its own plugin to tweak the main settings of its behavior. I'd confess, at first sight, it may be considered a totally pointless device, since you may, already have got faders to control modulation and expression. But trust me, that's the best way to control these MIDI parameters in real time, especially when playing woodwinds and breaths for tonguing, articulation, or fast attacks in crescendo. The second device I always use to control modulation or expression is a volume pedal plugged directly in my MIDI keyboard. I found it much easier and more straightforward compared to faders when you come to deal with modulation or expression lanes to be printed in real time while you're playing your virtual instrument in your keyboard. So anyway guys, I hope that helped, and see you in the next video, which will be focused on idiomatically writing with virtual instruments. I'll see you next time. Take care.